open up. Here we go. Woohoo! Ready to roll. Going to open up our doors. See everybody jumping in here. Roseanne. Hi, Bill. How are you? You've been busy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I'm doing good. Thanks.
Oh, good. Awesome. So you're doing fun stuff, I hope.
Getting ready for a move possibly. So cleaning the house up and getting it ready. I'm
Okay,
moving from
sorry.
Maryland to Florida.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well, I'm sorry. Moving doesn't really sound like fun, but
well, when it's moving from cold to warm like that and on the beach, it'll be nice. I hope.
there you go. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're all going to be jealous. Linda, hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. Super excited for today. Going to give it a sec and let some people jump in here. Chanel, Crystal, hello. Hi, Mark. Anybody got a great story to share?
Well, I was at the Advanced Aviation Summit that was held last week. Really good summit. I put it on my LinkedIn page a little bit, some of the pictures. I'm writing up an article for the vertical space for it. It was hosted by Lisa Ellman, who is with Howell and Lowell's there in DC, and they brought together under the Drone Alliance a really good program for a one-day program. So really nice time.
Wow. It sounds exciting and I bet very informative. What a group of people to get together. Yeah, maybe you'll have to share that with us sometime.
Be glad to. Can go
Okay.
over.
Awesome. All right, we're going to let a few more people in here. The doorbell keeps going off in the background, so I want to make sure that we give an opportunity to let everybody in. And I want to make a really exciting announcement, so I want to make sure that everybody is here for this. I don't want anybody to miss this. I'm super excited for what I get to announce. And I could see Sharon's smiling because she sent me over something that is coming up that I know is very near and dear to us. And I will share the press release. Wait, let's make sure I heard another doorbell. Wow, how's that for anticipation, right? It's like drum roll. Can't wait, right? Well, I get to share the press release for, are you ready for this? The 2023 Women in Emerging Aviation Technology Awards. And are you ready? Do you want to know where this is going to be held? I am so stoked.
Think I might know, but
You think you might know? Well,
I'm not saying.
No, don't steal my thunder. Hold on.
No.
Get on with it. Okay. I know you're sitting down and I'm glad you're sitting down because this year the award ceremony is going to be at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Yes, in Washington, D.C. Oh my gosh, I'm stoked. I'm so excited. I know you're floored, right? Did you just fall off your chair? I am so excited. So, give you a little bit more details. I'll also share the press release, but this is our 7th anniversary of the awards program. Sharon, you're amazing. 7 years we've been doing this. So exciting. And then it's going to be held in October 25th. There's also a summit, which will be held the day before. And then the awards nominations are due by Friday, June 16th. So I'm going to give you the press release. I'll put that in there right now. Oh, I'm so thrilled. Isn't that exciting? It's just amazing. So I'm going to put the press release into our chat. Aha, look at there. Look at, so who's going to Washington, D.C., right? I am excited. Awesome. So check out the press release. All the information's in there. Don't forget to start nominating who you want for the awards, and that information is in there as well. All right. Okay. So now I have even more exciting stuff happening. Just a sec here. I got to let some more people in. Super excited. Sheila has jumped in here, and I'm going to make her co-host as well so she can handle the back end for our staff that we got going on. And today we have 2 guest speakers. Isn't this awesome? I'm very excited. So, and I have to be honest, when they said what they were going to be talking about, I really did have to actually go and do my own kind of research. So I'm super excited. We have Dr. Debbie Jewitt, and she's a conservation scientist and works with, I hope I say this right, Debbie, Velo, KZN Wildlife. We also have Dr. Laura Cinti, is a research-based artist working with biology and co-director of Sea Lab. They are here going to share with us the results of a collaborative art science project that demonstrates the technology and use case for drones. And what an amazing project that they're working on. I am thrilled to have them here as a guest speaker. So I am going to make you both spotlight, and we will kind of kick this off. Also, we encourage you to do questions. If you could put those into the chat for us, that would be great. And we'll handle all the questions afterwards. So, because they have 2 amazing presentations. And so I'm going to make you spotlight. And let's go find Debbie and make you spotlight as well. And I'm going to kick this off by first, I know, Laura, you were going to go first and show your presentation, but can we both kind of just start this off by share a little bit about you, how you 2 even came together to collaborate on this project? All right.
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I actually came across Debbie's talk, her talk that she did on drones on women. And through the talk she did on drones and women, I got in touch with her, and that was the beginning of our collaboration.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's a perfect connection.
Yes, yes.
All right, go ahead, Debbie.
No, I was just saying we've come full circle, because Laura found my work originally on women and drones, and now we get to present our collaborative work here. So thank
We
you.
are excited to hear. And so let's just go ahead and dive right in. And Laura, I think you have a presentation that you have ready to share. All right, let's dive in.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay. Hi, thank you for the introduction, Desi, and also for the opportunity to share our project. As you know, I'm Laura Cinti, and I'm an artist. I'm based in the UK, and it's 5 o'clock here. I'm delighted to talk about our project titled The Living Dead on the Trail of a Female. And this project is a result of an award from a European-funded initiative called Roots and Seed that consists of 5 organizations across France, Spain, and Austria. So the overall aim was to generate projects that reflect on our current biodiversity emergency, and also to raise awareness about these issues. The Living Dead on the Trail of a Female is a biodiversity-focused art science project using drone technology and aerial mapping to locate a female partner for one of the rarest plants in the world, the cycad, the Encephalatus woodi. We are losing biodiversity faster than we can describe it. And this project is situated in the context of sobering scientific data that we are entering the planet's 6th mass extinction. We are losing hundreds of plants, animals, and insects every day. And of course, the biggest drivers of this extinction are human activities on the planet. The rate of species going extinct on Earth is at a pace never seen before. So plants in particular are disappearing twice as many times as mammals, birds, and amphibians combined. The project is inspired by the loneliest plant on Earth, the Encephalatus woodii, and draws attention to plants unable to survive in the wild. So isolated from their habitat, the extinct in the wild plants have been stripped of their ecological circumstances. So in other words, they are no longer reproductive members of their population. They're just living in a physiological sense. They are the living dead. And there are thousands of living dead plant species, and their chances of survival are through swift human intervention. Cycads are the oldest surviving seed plants that appeared before the age of dinosaurs around 300 million years ago. And they've survived multiple mass extinctions and environmental changes. And in spite of their incredibly long legacy, and as you can see in the graph, cycads are now the most endangered living organisms on Earth. And they're also worth millions of dollars annually in a thriving illegal market. So the poaching of cycads is the biggest threat to their survival, particularly the cutting of old trees that are growing in the wild, as they're in high demand in traditional medicine, and also, of course, as ornamental plants in gardens. As recent newspaper headlines have put, cycads are being loved to death. Cycads are considered status symbols by wealthy collectors worldwide, and as one collector put it, owning a rare cycad displays wealth and intelligence in a way owning luxury cars does not. So the biggest threat to cycads comes from people obsessed with owning them, but also that they grow extremely slowly and take decades to reach maturity. So like in the patience, many collectors prefer to buy a fully grown cycad, thereby driving the legal market. This is why one of the most valuable cycads, the Encephalatus woodii, or E. woodii for short, in the Kirstenbosch Botanical Garden in Cape Town is now secured inside a cage to prevent poaching. And already poaching activities in South Africa has resulted in the extinction of 3 cycad species in the wild, one of which is the E. woodii. E. woodii are so rare that they no longer exist in the wild. They're only known to survive in botanical gardens and private collections. E. woodii are well represented in botanical gardens globally, but with no hope of producing seed, the main conservation work is to increase their numbers vegetatively. In 1895, a single male tree was discovered in the Nagoya Forest Reserve in South Africa by John Medley Wood. On a botanical trip in the Nagoya Forest, he came across an individual clump of Encephalatus. It consisted of 4 stems. All the stems were male, and not another plant of the species could be found anywhere nearby. There were 4 offshoots, so one of the offshoots was removed and sent to London Kew Gardens in 1899, where it is still sitting there today, as you saw in the previous slide. And the other 3 offshoots were collected in 1903 and brought to the Durban Botanical Gardens, where they are still growing. 4 years later, in 1907, 2 of the largest stems were collected. In 1912, there was only 1 short and damaged stem of the original plant in the wild. And it was feared that this plant would be destroyed, so this final stem was removed by the forestry department, rendering the tree extinct in the wild. And this stem was sent to the government botanist in Pretoria, where it later died in 1964. These are the only E. woodii plants found, and all of them are male plants originating from this single plant. And all existing specimens are clones of this plant, and all are male. And it is one of or maybe if not the rarest and possibly most sought after species of cycad. Now, reproduction in cycads is intriguing. Each individual plant is either female or male, and it can take many years for a cone to be produced before we actually know the sex of the plant. For reproduction, each plant produces cones, and then, as you know, the pollen travels from the male to the female by insects. So cloning is currently the only way the Ewoodii survives as a true species. And as both sexes are needed for reproduction, without a female, it may never naturally reproduce again. Now, creating a female is a mammoth challenge. One approach is hybridization, and this has been going on since the 80s. And what this involves is crossing Ewoodii with the closest related relative, and then crossing the offspring again with the Ewoodii. And the aim is that with each successive generation, it becomes more and more and more Ewoodii. But given how long cycads take to become reproductive, we are now only on the second generation of these hybrids, and it would take possibly 75 years to get to the fourth generation. While they would look vegetatively very, very similar to the Ewoodii, genetically that wouldn't be the case, as the offspring inherit much more from the female than the male. Another strategy proposed is creating females by chemically inducing sex change in tissue-cultured plantlets from the existing male using chemical manipulation to create female tissues and generate plants from this material. However, tissue culturing for Ewoodii has been a major stumbling block. And also there's been very little sustained effort, but it is possible to make callus, which is a group of disorganized cells from leaves, roots, and stems. But the big stumbling block for the Ewoodii has been to go from callus to plants. In other words, it's difficult to get these cells or tissues to differentiate. So there's been very limited success with it. And the most successful attempt took 3 years to get to a plantlet from a rooted leaf cutting, and the plant did not survive. It also has been suggested that even the existing mature clone may undergo spontaneous sex change. So sex reversal has been observed in a few cases involving other species of cycad. And once the process is better understood, it could be used to induce this change in an Ewoodii plant. In a paper in what was probably the first known case of sex reversal in the cycad genus Encephalatus, of which notably the Ewoodii is one species of this genus, one of the specimens in the paper produced a male cone, but then 9 years later produced a female cone, and thereafter. And this plant was in a more exposed area, leading the author to speculate that a pre-cold weather spell may have initiated the sex change. The documented sex reversals are predominantly from female to male, and they usually coincide with the plant experiencing some stress or change to its environment. Now, given that many more Ewoodii plants now exist due to vegetative reproduction by cutting, and none of them have changed sex in more than 100 years, so spontaneous sex change in the Ewoodii has yet to occur. So, searching for a female plant seems more plausible than creating a female. The Nagoya forest is vast, with many areas that are inaccessible on foot, and there are acres and acres of uninspected areas, and a possibility for a female to be hiding amongst the dense canopies. Many excursions have taken place on foot. One documented trip searching for the Ewoodii in the Nagoya forest suggested that there are areas still not completely covered, and that it is still possible that an Ewoodii exists. Although the plant is already extinct in nature, The area of the Nagoya forest where the original wood eye was found hasn't been fully surveyed. And there is hope that a plant may still be in the forest. So our approach asks, how can remote sensing technologies be used to access previously inaccessible parts of the Nagoya forest? And how could it provide an alternative approach to mapping the space? To conduct the search, we got in touch with an organization called the Batelier that provide aerial support services to environmental missions in South Africa. And one of the pilots offered to fly over the Nagoya forest. And this pre-mission flight provided a view from the forest from above and allowed us to assess the viability of future missions and define the search areas for the drone flight. After larger tracts of the forest were covered using aerial imagery taken from the manned aircraft, a Cessna 182, where imagery was taken from each side of the plane, one on the east side and the other west facing. So now I will pass you over to Debbie, who will tell us more about the mission and how drone technology was used to enhance our search.
Thanks very much for that great question, Laura.
Thank you.
All right, and while she's bringing that up, we did see some questions that had popped up into our chat. We're going to take the questions at the end, so feel free to put those questions into our chat. All right, Debbie, looks good.
Looks good. Great. Thanks for that. So we're desperately looking for a girlfriend for Wood Cycad. I apologize for my croaky voice. I have a bit of a cold, so I hope my voice will last. So we went to Nagoya Forest and we used a DJI Matrice 210 drone with a multispectral camera fitted onto the drone. And we flew transects across the most likely areas where we could expect to find the species. So there were a couple of assumptions made. One, that the species would be an adult species and it would stick through the canopy of the forest. And then in South Africa, we have quite strict drone rules about how far we can fly away from a pilot. So it did restrict us. We had to be strategic as to where we could search. So we did grid flights. We flew at 80 meters above the forest. It was tricky because it's a very hilly terrain and it's not ideal because when you're flying over it, your ground resolution would change. So on average, we had a ground resolution of 8 centimeters, pixel resolution or ground resolution. But it varied depending on whether we were flying over a mountaintop or a valley bottom. We then used a Microsense Red Edge MX multispectral sensor to do this, and a multispectral camera, in addition to the normal red, green, and blue sensors that you're familiar with a color camera, has 2 extra bands in it. And that is the red edge band and the near infrared. Now, this is the physics lessons for you. So visible light and what humans see is the blue, green, and red colors. And the extra sensors on the multispectral camera give us this red edge and the near infrared light. Now, chlorophyll, the red band absorbs the chlorophyll, whereas the near infrared reflects that color. So the red edge is where that change happens most readily. So using the near infrared band allows you to gain information about vegetation that is very useful. So this is just a graph to show you the vegetation, and you can see how rapidly the information you gain changes from the red band into the red edge and the near infrared bands. And it's used very extensively in agriculture to gain crop health, determine species. So each time a photograph is triggered, it takes 5 photographs and it's always in the grayscale. But you can see even in the different bands, you are starting to pull out different information, and this is where the value comes in using a multispectral camera. Some of you might be familiar with hyperspectral imagery that you can get from satellites. It works on the same principle, but it's a lot less bands than hyperspectral imagery, but you get all of this wonderful, wonderful information coming from these extra bands that one has on the camera. So you have these 5 different bands, your blue, green, red, red edge, and near red, and then you can combine them on your computer using, for instance, a GIS package or other software like Pix4D Mapper. And you can then, a computer only sees, in inverted commas, 3 colors. So you can combine 3 bands at any one time, or you can do maths calculations with them and subtract them. So for instance, you can create your NDVI, which is an indication of the health of vegetation. So in NDVI, you have a ratio between your near infrared and your red band, and it tells you the status. And you can assign any color ramp you want to it, but yeah. So the different bands that you have is your blue, green, red, red edge, and near infrared. And these all give you different information. So the bands that you want to use, you would choose depending on the information that you want to pull out. So for instance, the blue band is very good at giving you deep water imaging. If you wanted to look into water to distinguish your smoke plumes from atmospheric haze and clouds, and then snow and rock. Whereas your green band, obviously we're very familiar with seeing the green band that gives you plant figure and can be used to identify vegetation classes. It's good for algal and cyanobacterial blooms. Your red band is useful, strangely enough, to identify different soil types and geologic features. It would help you to distinguish the built environment from the natural environment. And obviously that's where chlorophyll absorption occurs. Then your red edge is where you get information on your plant health and your age status. So it's very good for chlorophyll and leaf structure. And it's often used in crop monitoring in the agricultural sense. So you can, if you use the red edge band, you would be able to detect your healthy versus your diseased plants and plant nutrition. And then your near infrared band helps you to separate water and vegetation. And this is quite important in shadow areas. So you can distinguish between shadows as well, especially if your water might be in a shaded area. And interestingly, also to identify archaeological sites. So if you were an archaeologist working on the pyramids in Egypt, this would be a good band for you. So here, as I said, we combine 3 bands at any one time. So if we just combine the bands 3, 2, and 1, which is red, green, blue, we start getting the normal color as we would experience it with the human eye. But then the fun part starts, because you can now create your false color composites. So here we've used bands 4, 3, and 1, 4 being your red edge band, and you can see the red color coming out. So this is telling us how much photosynthetic material is there. And sorry, I hope my voice lost. And also the amount of biomass that's there. When one uses the multispectral camera, one must use it in constant light conditions. So ideally in sunny conditions at midday to minimize your shadow effects, or constantly overcast weather. Our luck when we were in the field to do this, we had partly cloudy weather, and you can see this effect on here. You can see the red going into a shadow area on the side. So not the best conditions to use multispectral imaging, but this is a reality of traveling several hours to go into the field, and you can't control the weather conditions. But what I'd like to point out is this blue tree on the right-hand photograph. On the left-hand side of it, you can see it's blue. So very easily, we can tell that this tree has died in the landscape, and it just pops compared to when we have our normal color image on the left. It's just, it pops. So what we were hoping to do with the multispectral imagery was to fly over the forest and have a different spectral signature for the different species. And hopefully this rare sarcad would pop and be more visible to us than having to search through a maze of green forest trees. So here we used a false color composite of 5, 2, and 3, and you can see that it shows bare areas very easily. On the bottom right, we can see a road going through the grasslands, and then geology type. So it's actually quite interesting. You can see the different bands of geology coming out using this color composite, and indeed geologists would use satellite imagery to scan large areas of the earth for their different geological compounds. And then here you can see the different unique spectral characteristics for each species. In the circle, we can see that this tree has flowers or seed pods, so it sticks out really easily. On the tree below, we can see the bare branches, but it's not a dead tree. It's just a more open canopy than the example we had before. Then, in addition to looking for the different colors and the spectral signatures, one would then look for structure as well. So the sarcad would have a palm-like structure. So one would then search for a palm-like structure through the different canopies and use that in association with the spectral signature of the species. So if you're seeing a lot of these kind of red colored areas, you know that that's not going to be your sarcad. You'd be looking for a color that stands out on its own, as well as the structure. So here, when we were looking, we just saw a different structured tree. Unfortunately, not the sarcad. You can see your grassland patches stick out really clearly. So one then could go further and use AI to assist you in the search and classify your canopy sizes and the volume of the trees if that information was useful to you. So have we found a girlfriend yet? Unfortunately not. Our wood sarcad is still very lonely. We haven't searched the whole forest yet. We'd like to work on a new project going forward. But this drone technology is just providing such useful information that can be used to enhance and streamline the search. So we will continue searching for our girlfriend, for wood sarcad. And these are just some of the acknowledgements of everyone that was involved in the project. And thanks very much. And thanks for bearing with my squeaky voice.
Well, thank you. So I know when your voice is out and you're still trying to do this, so we really appreciate it that you've shared with us. So I'm going to circle back to some of the questions that have popped up into our chat. I'll have to rely on Sheila to see if she spots any that I missed. And so what great information. Thank you both for sharing that, and just really opens our eyes up to use case and just the different ways that drones are being used. While we're circling back to some of the questions that are in the chat, the great presentation about using the multispectral and such like that. What type of training did you need so that you can actually identify the plants that you were examining?
So that's a great question. And what one would need to do if you wanted to identify the different tree species that were there was to do a whole lot of field sampling. So you would survey an area, and then you would go into the field and you'd GPS and identify each tree that you have there. And then you could train your model and come up that this might be a saltus, or that might be, I can't think of any names now, but another species of forest tree. That didn't concern us in this case because the wood sarcad that we would be looking for would be so rare that it would stand out on its own. So in this instance, we weren't interested in identifying the other species that are occurring in the forest. We're only looking for something that's different, that's rare. So, but yes, you could do that, and it just would be lots of field data collection and then training your model.
And you had mentioned AI, and I know Bill later on, as I scroll down in the chat, had mentioned how AI is being used in this use case as well. Yeah, so I'm going to ask, one of the questions that came up is this anywhere historically connected to Nagoya, Japan? Did I say it correctly?
I can't honestly answer that question, but I don't think so. It's a Zulu word. So it's separate to Japan.
Okay, all righty. And let's see, I'm gonna kind of scroll through here and see a lot of people very excited for the presentation. And Laura, you just really presented a side of things that many of us are not aware of. And so your presentation was phenomenal. And so I was going to ask a little bit more about the environment that you'll be looking in. And is it the female would traditionally be in the same environment? I think she's muted. Are you
Just
muted?
unmute.
There we go.
Okay. It should be, but I'm not sure I can answer that question, because it's been 126 years since we haven't found a female. So in theory, we would think it would be in the same area.
Yeah, okay. In theory, I like it. There you go. In theory, it should be, right? So tell us about some of the hurdles that you had to overcome to get approval to fly the drone in that area.
Okay, so because it's one of KZN Wildlife's reserves, KZN Wildlife is the provincial conservation organization. So we needed to just register the project and then inform staff when we would be going onto the reserve. And then when the project's finished, just write a closeout report. But the challenge comes more not in registering the project with my company. It's in terms of dealing with our Civil Aviation Authority and flying in their rule structure that makes it. So we have to fly with our ratings that we have, which are the entry-level ratings. We have to fly visual line of sight, so one can't fly very far. And in a hilly environment, you obviously can't be at the bottom of the hill and send your drone away. You need to be at the top of the hill that you can still see where your drone is going. So the challenges were more around being in the field and finding good sites from where you could launch. And then also just narrowing the search, which is why we use the aerial searches, and then expert opinion on the more likely areas of the forest where that species would be. So we narrowed the search because of the constraints on how far we could fly with a drone. We did this preliminary project and based it on our search using a normal aircraft, and then narrowing the search further based on expert opinion on the best areas to work in the forest.
Oh, all right. And it looks like Laura answered one of the questions that Bill had regarding gene editing to create a female, and Laura has already answered in there in the chat. So make sure you check out the chat that not at this time. And so it looks like that was already answered. And excellent application. What drone actually are you using?
So it's a DJI Matrice 210. It is a multi-rotor. I see there's an associated question that says, would a fixed wing drone be used for the scale of the forest? So yes, a fixed wing drone would be able to fly further. Again, two challenges there. One, as an organization, we don't have a fixed wing drone. And then number two, you're still restricted by the civil aviation regulations as to how far you can fly. So it didn't come down to the technology of the drone that we were flying. We could have flown a slightly bigger area with the multi-rotor drones we have, but we still had to operate within the framework of our Civil Aviation Authority. But yeah, a fixed wing would be much, much better. And we are hoping to do some training in the latter part of this year to get our beyond visual line of sight rating. We have to have additional training per pilots. And in South Africa, you get rated on your type of aircraft as well. So we are only rated to fly multi-rotor drones, which is fine because we don't have a fixed wing. But if one was flying a fixed wing, you'd need to be trained on flying a fixed wing as well, and then get your rating as per the type of aircraft you have. So at the moment, and then once you as the pilot has got that BV loss rating, you still then need to have your organization and your operations manual to be endorsed by the Civil Aviation Authority. And that's a case-by-case application based pretty much on risk and the type of aircraft you have that would then determine how far you would be able to fly. So we would probably get a rating of about 2 to 3 kilometers with what we have. So it's not fantastic, but it certainly would be better than the 500 meters we can fly now. So yeah, and then to get that rating endorsed, we have to go through another audit procedure with the Civil Aviation Authority. So it's we just baby steps at this stage. We're still growing.
Well, that was one of the things that I've known from listening to Louise in the fireside chats is it just seems that the regulations are just huge hurdles for you to overcome. And so the fact that you got this permission to go and do this project is amazing. And so very exciting to hear about that. One of the things that I would like to hear a little bit more about is through my research and having conversations with people, I had heard about people poaching the plant, and then I heard that they're also chipped to maybe alleviate people stealing and such like that. Are these actually chipped? I'm gonna unmute again.
Keep
No worries.
muting. I'm not sure what you mean. Are they chopped? No. As far as I know, no. But there's been there's a wood cyclone in one of the university campus in Pretoria, and that cyclone is alarmed, and it has a cage and it's alarmed, and so in terms of chipped, I don't know, it would be too big a plant to chip, is my understanding, but
Okay.
yeah.
So they do chip cycads and other species. We do that in, so a little hole is drilled into the side, and then you put this little tiny transponder on that if you have a scanner, you can then read it and get the information about what species it is and where it is. But the poachers can have those scanners too, and then they can remove that chip. So it's useful to a point. But if you looked at the photos Laura put up in her slide presentation, you would have seen the one at Kirstenbosch has got a big fence around it. So, I mean, these things are heavily guarded and secured. It's quite crazy, actually. So many people think in the South African context of rhino poaching, which is a major, major issue, but it pales into insignificance compared to poaching of our plant species. So other plant species that are in huge demand from South Africa is all the succulent species that come from the more arid areas in the country, in the Karoo. And then, of course, we have our own floral kingdom down in the Cape called the fynbos, with lots of rare plants there. So it's a beauty to have all this biodiversity and plants and our own floral kingdom, but it's globally in high demand.
Yes, yes. And it's great that we're now so aware of this. It's something that I know personally I haven't been aware of. So it's nice that we have this opportunity that you are sharing it with us to give us awareness of it. Bill has asked a question in there, and it might have actually been answered as well. But Laura and Debbie, how did you interact to ensure the drone was getting the necessary data? Did Laura tell Debbie particular information, or Debbie provide the feedback?
Well, this is reliant on Debbie, but at the end of this, we also wanted to provide an exhibition around the videos and materials that we gathered to tell the story. When I exhibited this piece of work, is exhibited as a big installation, and people invited to take part in the search, and it's about raising awareness about this biodiversity issue. So that was my thing, but I was very reliant on Debbie for the necessary data.
So just to state that Laura and I have never met in person, unfortunately.
Oh,
Actually, a COVID project. It happened during COVID, so we never actually had the opportunity to meet, and then we still haven't met.
Could I follow up, Desi?
the magic of Zoom.
Right.
Okay, who
Hey,
just said
Debbie
that?
and
Bill?
Laura, what I'm interested in is the teamwork through Zoom, but what was the information back and forth between you as the scientist, Laura, and how did you get Debbie interested? And Debbie, how did you become interested? I mean, there must have been that give and take of what you were trying to do, Laura, you know, what the problem was, and Debbie, you deciding, well, I might be able to answer that or have a solution for it. Can you describe that back and forth?
Well, as mentioned, Laura, I wrote or gave a presentation on how drones might be able to be used in searching for rare plants such as cycads. And Laura called my bluff on that. She contacted me and said, okay, you've said this, now here's a project for you. So I am a biologist or an ecologist. So obviously I'm very interested in that to begin with. And I'm also a pilot, a registered pilot. So it was this fantastic opportunity to just try a project that no one has ever tried before. And that's the really nice thing and the exciting part about it, is that there's no established way, no right or wrong way that you can look up in a textbook and go, this is what I must do. So there was a fair amount of trial and error. So we had lots of emails backwards and forwards. We discussed the limitations of what we would be able to do with the project. But in the end, exactly where and how I flew was left to me. And indeed, that changed on the day. I had done all of my pre-flight planning, and I had more missions planned. But when we got to the site on the day, I couldn't fly those missions. So we had to change on the fly. So that was pretty much left up to me to identify the areas. And I engaged with my colleagues who work in that area and are responsible for those reserves and have more information. And then the data flow went backwards and forwards. And then Laura might say to me, please try a different band combination. Please, can you give me higher resolution of this? So there was lots of backwards and forwards after, but the actual in the field data collection was left up to me, as it had to be amended on the day. You can do as much planning as you want, and then reality hits and you have to just adapt on the day. Yeah, but the final exhibition was actually done in Linz, Austria, and it was interactive. So whilst we are sad we never found a girlfriend, the absolute value of this project is multiple fold, but it's this awareness bringing where you can match an art and a science and a conservation project together. And the story that we are able to tell and be able to share to so many different audiences around the world has been phenomenal, and a really, really fun part of working on this project that is just to be able to tell this sad story. I mean, it would be fantastic if we could give it a happy ending. But we'll keep working on that.
Well, I'd love to have a follow-up on that happy ending. That would be awesome. So I don't know if you're following the chat at all, but Michelle Maderas, she's here online, and they have a company called Wingspan, and she has a phenomenal drone. And so it's a fixed wing. And she's put into the chat that, yes, they do multispectral training and all of that. And so, you know, we're about making connections. So the perfect opportunity to connect, right? So
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just said, are you ready to go to South Africa?
You betcha.
Get all your
Hey, real
approvals
quick,
from our
guys.
authorities.
When you're talking about terrain following, are you talking about GPS denied operations, or like actually simply like just like being able to view on your GCS like the route as you're planning? Can you kind of explain that a little bit more? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
I didn't use terrain following on the drone at all. I was pretty new at that stage. So I just set it at a fixed height above the forest, so it might not have been ideal. But that drone would have been changing height almost continuously. And I didn't want to lose my drone in a forest that I couldn't get to go and find it if I messed up the terrain following. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of improvements that we could do on the project. But it was the first time trying something like this. So I definitely erred on the cautious side, but that would be fantastic. It would be really nice to fly slightly lower, say 50 meters above the canopy, have terrain following that ground resolution remains constant, but then I'm going to rely on Wing Expand, I think, for someone else.
There you go.
Well,
Awesome.
very cool project.
Thank you.
Yes. So we are just about out of time, and there's a lot of conversation into the chat. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up with it and have time to ask all the questions. I think we've actually covered quite a bit as far as like the terrain aware and some options. You've explained why you weren't able to use anything terrain aware at this time. And so I apologize that I'm not going to be able to get to all the questions. So a couple things. One, I think there's something really exciting that Laura has recently received. Maybe we could share a little bit about that. Right?
Oh, I'm actually not supposed to release any information until next month.
Okay, well, stay tuned. There's more information coming there.
It's very exciting, and it will give us an opportunity to present the project again.
Awesome. But and you're going to be presenting together coming up, aren't you? Do you have a presentation that you're planning?
No, the project will be exhibition. It would be a visual piece and an interactive exhibition where the audience could get involved in the search in an interactive way.
Fantastic. Can't wait to hear more about that. Maybe Wingspan will be a part of it. Right? Oh, and so Debbie put her information in there. Laura, do you mind putting your information if somebody wanted to reach out to you to get some more information?
Sure.
If you have a way that people could contact you? You really, really just opened our eyes to that value that there is to a world that some of us are just not aware of, and perfect use case for drones. I love that, and how you've been able to incorporate this and have a success. I am just excited that you were here to share with us today. I'm super happy that you were available. I know we have a time difference with everybody. So I thank you all. And we are right about when I want to cut things off. So that way, if people do have to jump off and head to another meeting, you'll have some time. So I want to thank you very much, Debbie and Laura, both of you. Thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. I thank you and appreciate you coming and sharing with us on the Coffee Connection. And there's Sheila. Yes, thank you. So I hope we made some great connections here. I'm glad you connected through Women in Journals. It's a pretty good story. Awesome. Well, I thank everybody and we will see you next week. Oh, really quick, next week, Luis is going to be our guest speaker and Sheila is going to be running the show because I will be at AUVSI. So if you're at AUVSI, I hope to see you there. And if you're not able to go, I know Sheila and Louise are going to be fantastic on the Coffee Connection. So we'll see you. See you next week.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
You.
That kind of wraps it up.